Congratulations! If you're still watching waiver wire videos going into week 15, that means you're either still in the playoffs or you're about to start the playoffs, or you just care that much about fantasy football that you want to win regardless. Either way, you deserve some congrats. Like, no matter what the case is, you can always find help on the wire, even this late in the season. And of course, there's always players getting injured, and the next man up could be the one who helps you get that victory. Let's figure out who could help you going into week 15. First, real quick, ask that you help us out. If you have been watching this channel, even just right now, like if you just started watching, or the way you've been watching all season or for a couple weeks, it doesn't matter. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We're trying to get to our goal of 100K for subs. We're on the way there. Help us out if you could. Now, we're coming off the heels of week 14. That was huge for a lot of you in fantasy football. It's huge for these NFL teams too. A lot of them scrapping to get in the playoffs. And so we saw the first of those games was a matchup on Thursday between Detroit and Dallas. Both of these teams basically were like in must-win territory. Well, Detroit pulled it out, but partly thanks to a CeeDee Lamb injury. He was going off in the first half and then didn't get to play and finish out the game in the second half because of a concussion. Of course, if you were watching that game, you know it did not look good. He was in that fencing posture, which indicates it was severe. Now, of course, they got a little extra time because it was on Thursday, possibly to prepare for this week, but would not be remotely surprising if CeeDee Lamb sat in week 15. So you're going to have to find an alternative to one of the best receivers in the game. I got a few options for you, including one in Dallas. Another potentially significant injury from a fantasy stud, a must start every single week. Devon Achane, you saw he was already also having a huge first half, over 100 yards and a touchdown, and then he missed the second half of that game due to a rib injury. Now, the good news here is that after the game, it sounded like it really wasn't that serious. Of course, the fear was a fractured rib, but it could just be bruised. Of course, we don't know right now exactly the situation, but Mike McDaniel, the coach, gave some positive outlook here. He said that he was available to come back in the game in case of emergency, which, you know, against the Jets, there was no emergency. But also he said, quote unquote, he'll be there if he's ready in week 15. So obviously we don't know if he's ready. We'll have to find out later in the weeks. But the good news is it doesn't sound like he's sure to miss week 15 and may not miss any time at all. But even if he plays, we still have another intriguing option we got to look at in that Miami backfield. And then let's go to the quarterbacks. I say quarterbacks because there were several starters who left this game. And yeah, you know there's some serious ones here. Let's start with a guy who just came back, Jaden Daniels. And yes, it was that exact same left elbow. This one not nearly as serious in terms of the impact, but just the fact that it was the same area. Well, and then the fact that Washington, again, not only losing, but just getting demolished by the Vikings. I mean, look, there's no team that has free fallen bigger than the Washington Commanders this year. And it just keeps getting worse because they also lost tight end Zach Ertz. And if you saw that injury, I mean, it just looked horrible, that impact to the knee. And after the game, Dan Quinn said he's fearing it's an ACL. I mean, so Ertz's season is probably over, and JD, even if this injury isn't as significant, at this point, everyone's saying it, and it's just true. Why is he even going to go out there at this point? There's no chance of playoffs. Why risk your franchise quarterback with this injury, which already got re-aggravated? So we may not see him. Whether he could play or not, JD might get shut down. Now, the worst of all was Daniel Jones, and sure enough, when you saw it, non-contact injury, dropping back, and you saw him kind of buckle there, and sure enough, we're hearing it's the Achilles. He is done for this season. Possibly, you know, the beginning of next season is in question, and Daniel Jones was just coming off his best season, showing and proving he could be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. So we'll see heading into free agency how this affects him. But as far as fantasy, this has got to be a big blow to that Colts passing game, because the next man up, as you saw, was Riley Leonard. Unproven rookie, not exactly a high-end draft pick here. Like, he wasn't bad, but at the same time, how great can you feel going forward? And then just when we thought we knew who the Jets quarterback was going to be, Tyrod Taylor left very early in the game with a groin injury, and Justin Fields had already been ruled out. He didn't play because he's got some sort of a knee injury. So we saw rookie Brady Cook. We might see him next week. Who knows? But I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say we could just pass on that Jets passing offense the rest of this year. And you've probably been saying that for a long time with the Raiders, but just to add some injury on top of it, Geno Smith hurt his right shoulder in this game, and so Kenny Pickett entered, and maybe the guy next week, who knows? And then an impressive effort by Shedeur Sanders. Well, he's intact, he's fine, but One of those touchdowns to David Njoku, a really impressive grab in the end zone, a 1-yard touchdown. He injured his knee, and so once again, he's going to be questionable heading into next week. And then also Keaton Mitchell, young running back for the Ravens, also injured his knee, and he's had a history of knee troubles. He missed all last year, so at this point, it looks like Rasheen Ali is going to be the RB2 in Baltimore for what it's worth. All right, now who should you target on the waiver wire heading into week 15? Should be your fantasy playoffs, whether it's the beginning or the middle of it, whatever the case is, you can always find help. We're going to start with the more high priority ads, the guys who are more highly owned. If they're still out there, don't wait, just pick them up. And look, I'm going to have to mention again, Mike Evans. A lot of you smartly, thankfully scooped him up because we pretty much begged you, just do not leave him in the waivers. So he didn't come back and play yet, but it sounds like there's a good chance he'll play, even though the Bucs do play on Thursday in a short turnaround, but it sounds like he was close. Again, moreover, just whether you need him or not, pick him up, whether he plays this week or not. He can help over the final couple of weeks, and don't leave him for somebody else, okay? So I'm just going to say it again. Mike Evans, I know we haven't seen him for a long time. It's still Mike Evans. They need him in this offense. Don't leave him on waivers for somebody else in your league. And the same thing goes for rookie Devin Neal. We don't know if Alvin Kamara is coming back this season. Doesn't sound promising that he'll be back anytime soon, and even so, why would they rush him back? Devin Neal had finally a decent game here. I mean, actually rushing the ball, 70 yards on the ground and a touchdown. And just imagine if Tyler Shuck didn't keep vulturing him near the goal line. But look, he caught one pass for 14 yards, but he's been doing more work as a receiver in the past couple of weeks. A little Kamara-esque, and if this offense needs somebody, he is the guy, right? There's nobody else in that backfield threatening his touches. And this schedule is not that bad the rest of the season. Gets Carolina next week, gets the Jets after that, and gets the Titans. So, I mean, I don't think Devin Neal's a league winner. Don't say that I'm pegging him that way, but he's a guy with sneaky flex value that could be in your lineup potentially even in the playoffs. And then I almost hesitate to mention, but I feel obligated to talk about Tony Pollard. Now, this could totally be a trap. Tony Pollard, best game of the season, right? This blow up came from absolutely nowhere. So Tony Pollard, of course, against a really tough Cleveland run defense, had his best game by far. 2 long touchdowns. Started out by ripping off a long touchdown run in the first quarter, and we thought, all right, well, that happens. Then another pretty long 32-yard touchdown run later in the game, and then he wound up totaled with 161 yards, those 2 scores, and 25 carries. Those are like Saquon Barkley numbers. Okay, Saquon Barkley of last year numbers, but yeah, this is insane. He didn't have a 100-yard rushing game all year. He hadn't even gone over 60 yards on the ground since week 5. So this does not make Tony Pollard an absolute must-add or a must-start, but maybe there's something to this. I will say next week they get the 49ers. 49ers defense, of course, all those injuries, they haven't been great. They're allowing 4.5 yards per carry over the past month. So it's not a tough matchup per se. I just worry about game script. I mean, let's face it, they were facing Cleveland Browns. This is going to be the Niners, who have a lot more firepower in offense. The Titans may not be able to just sit back and run the ball as much. So look, Pollard at least has jumped back on the radar in your deeper leagues. Let's just put it that way. And for those who are, well, either still streaming quarterback, which is totally fine, or we're counting on JD to do something this comeback. All right, well, you got options. Don't worry. If possible, you can just go and grab Brock Purdy for San Francisco. As I mentioned, they got all their players back and healthy. Hopefully this bye just helps all of them rest up. Purdy hasn't really been 100% himself, but he's looked pretty sharp recently. Look, this week, going to get that Titans defense, absolutely nothing to be scared about. So even if it's not the highest ceiling there, if you're still scrambling to start a quarterback by this point, like Purdy should make you at least feel pretty comfortable. And not too far off is Jackson Dart, also coming off the bye, so there's a good chance he might have been dropped in these leagues where, just managers didn't need him, couldn't wait for him. So Jackson Dart, again, not the highest ceiling, but this is what you're looking at when you are streaming quarterbacks, right? You can't expect an elite QB every week. But you might get elite performance from Dart because he gets that Washington defense. Don't need to mention it. You just saw that Washington defense get lit up by J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings. Yeah, they got shut out 31-0. And the week before that, they gave up a ton of points to Denver. I mean, they're giving up points and yards to the worst offenses out there, basically. This team, again, just total collapse here. I mean, of course, with all the injuries they've had, this defense is nothing like last year. So I mean, you can just roll out dart and he might be higher ranked than some of these other starting quarterbacks that you've been going with. All right, now the new names on the list. Well, we'll start with a guy who it remains to be seen whether he's going to be a plug-and-play flex or if he's going to be someone you just kind of keep in stash, is Jalen Wright of the Dolphins. Now, of course, this depends on the Achane injury. At first, it looked like this was an automatic must-add, but now we're hearing Achane may not miss time, but it doesn't mean that he won't, or maybe they'll just limit his touches. So either way, I feel like Jalen Wright has earned the right to some touches after what we saw. Granted, it was the Jets. I understand that, but still, it was Wright's first ever 100-yard rushing game, 107 yards, but more significantly, 24 carries. Keep in mind, Devon Achane didn't miss this entire game. He was out there, he was having a big game until Wright then took over. And also this means that Ollie Gordon, who a lot of people thought was the handcuff and the stash here, Ollie Gordon only had 5 carries. It's pretty obvious Wright is the guy now, assuming Achane is out. This is going to be tricky, but I would say if you have Achane, absolutely you almost need to bid to try to get Wright just as some insurance. If you have the space, why not get him anyways? Because then that prevents the Achane owner from potentially getting him. It's worth it. This may wind up being nothing this week, honestly, but Wright at least could have some sort of deep league value here as a flex. Now, again, you shouldn't need to go this deep. It's the playoffs. There are no more teams on bye, but at this point, let's just say it might be worth it. Look, this Dolphins offense, for what it's worth, they are establishing the run. It's hard to believe, especially for me, obviously a lifelong Dolphins fan. Somehow the Dolphins have decided they can win with running and defense, and they are doing it. They've won 4 games in a row and 5 of the last 6. They're not passing the ball hardly at all. They are just rushing, they're pinning back their ears and running, and it's working. They have now 4 straight games, all wins, with over 160 yards on the ground in each of them. And so, yeah, Wright actually might have a little bit of value even if Achane is good to go. And the schedule is just very promising even after this week. They're against that Pittsburgh defense on the road, granted a little tougher, and then they get the Bengals in week 16. So think about that. And then your potential replacement if CeeDee Lamb misses. Well, again, if you watch that game on Thursday, you already know Ryan Flournoy definitely made some noise. He wound up with 115 yards and a touchdown on 9 catches. More shockingly, really, is 13 targets. Remember, CeeDee Lamb actually played half of that game and was doing pretty well. George Pickens, whether you know it or not, he was out there all game. You know, he just decided not to catch the balls that went his way. So they kept going over and over again to Flournoy. And man, he was productive. Now, he has had a random outburst like this before and then disappeared. This is a game where they were down big. They had to continue to pass the ball, but this is what Dallas does. They always have to pass the ball. Keep in mind, every game you're going to want anybody who's in the Dallas offense and anybody who's going against the Dallas defense. That really hasn't changed even after their trade acquisitions because, look, on the season, Dallas, number 2 offense in terms of points scored, but they're number 1 on defense in terms of points allowed. Dak is just on a roll, right? Win or lose. He's doing his job. That's why they're number 1 in terms of passing yardage in the NFL. And so, yeah, if Lamb misses, Flournoy looks like a really strong add. Not a new name, but I think we just have to keep putting Blake Corum higher up the rankings here in terms of priority. He's definitely not just a handcuff anymore. And somehow, despite his production, Kyren Williams not really affected. I mean, he's not maybe an elite running back anymore because he's not a workhorse. He's still scoring. He's still fine. And yet Blake Corum at times has looked better than Kyren Williams despite getting not as many touches. In this week alone, week 14, we saw Corum go for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, this is just an offense. Again, kind of like the Cowboys, the Rams just continue to steamroll. They're going to put up points every week. And now we got 2 running backs that have value. Corum, at this point, he's the 1B in that offense. He doesn't have to be just a handcuff. I mean, sure, you could probably just flex him and not feel too bad about it. I know we don't usually advise stashing receivers. I know some of you out there had an eye on Jayden Reed. It's hard for us to get too excited about a guy who's in an offense of the Packers that you know they kind of use a committee here. They spread the ball around week to week. It's a different guy, and Jayden Reed just doesn't get that volume. Now, he didn't really have a lot of volume this week in his first game back, which, by the way, that was another thing. Kind of wanted to be sure Reed was actually healthy and ready to return before I say, hey, pick up Jayden Reed. All right, so he played. He made it through a game. There's step 1. Step 2, get some targets. Yeah, I mean, he did enough here. Not that you wish you would have started him, but, well, 4 catches, 31 yards. Also 2 carries for 22 yards. This is the thing with Jayden Reed. You know, they use him a lot in the backfield, kind of those end arounds. He works out of the slot. And the problem is, as I mentioned, limited snaps. He is not out there on 2 receiver sets a lot. And it feels like this year now, the Packers have even more options. You see a guy like Bo Melton make a play. Just last week, Dontavian Wicks had a huge game. Christian Watson is actually healthy. So it's going to be tricky to trust Jayden Reed. He's always just going to be a volatile flex, and that's it. But he does have upside. He could, of course, score. He gets some touches in the backfield. So he is back to being what he was. Upside, volatile, risky, but somewhat intriguing flex. Now, if you look at the schedule, you probably want to know part of him because this coming week, Packers play at Denver. Obviously an elite defense there, but also, you know, that pass defense has shut some teams down. But this might work to his advantage because, you know, Pastor Tan, if he's going to shout out somebody, it's not Jayden Reed because he's not out there all the time, but also he works in the slot. It's probably going to be Christian Watson. And so if Watson's getting that attention, they might have to go to a guy like Reed a little bit more. Again, I'm not saying I expect big things from him, but he's an option. After that, the schedule does soften up. They get the Bears again, and then they get the Ravens. Did someone say risky but volatile upside flex who plays out of the slot? All right, I'll see your Jayden Reed with a Rashid Shaheed. So this is the first time since moving to Seattle that we've been actually able to feel somewhat lukewarm about Rashid Shaheed. This is the first time he's done anything. First 4 games as a Seahawk after being a trade acquisition at the deadline, a total of 11 targets in 4 games. So we ask ourselves every week, why did they do this? Like, what was the point here? You're not going to use him. Of course, it takes time to integrate a new offense. And I mean, they really don't need to pass to anybody who isn't Jackson Smith and Jigba, because it seems to be working just fine. But you figure at some point they might, with Torrey Horton out for the season, and, you know, Cooper Kupp just doing very minimal work. Finally, it's happened here. Rashid Shaheed, of course, first made an impact as a returner, a 100-yard kick return for a touchdown. It doesn't help you in fantasy too much unless you're in one of those return yard leagues, but he actually did something on offense as well. 4 catches, 67 yards. And although you probably don't get points for targets, again, we look at that as an indicator of usage. This leads to production, and so he actually got 5 targets. That is good. No promise that he'll get that much next week or going forward, but it could just be a matter of finally feeling comfortable here, or at least Darnold feeling comfortable throwing to him. Whatever the case is, Shaheed at least looks like an option. You've been waiting for a tight end option? All right, I got 2 for you. Let's start with the priority. Harold Fannin, been inconsistent, as has that whole Cleveland Brown offense and defense. But look, Harold Fannin has asserted himself pretty clearly now, again, as Shedeur Sanders' favorite target. Had his best game of the season with 114 yards and a touchdown, 8 catches. So this coincides with Shedeur Sanders' breakout game as a pro. It took a couple weeks for him to get comfortable, and he looked pretty good. Now, you got to keep in mind, number 1, this is against the Titans, okay? And number 2, this was basically, I don't say garbage time all, but a lot of comeback mode, right? They were down early. They had to pass a lot more than they wanted. Cleveland typically plays more defense than they did this game, and, you know, they don't really want to have to pass a ton. But at the same time, they might have to going forward if their defense isn't going to show up. And a reminder, as I mentioned, even though David Njoku found the end zone too, it was just 1 catch, and then he got hurt. I mean, if he's out, yes, Fannin maybe, you know, to the moon. Get the Bears next week. That is a great spot for him potentially. So Fannin is going to be your strongest option on the waiver wire. He's still out there in almost half of all leagues. But if you need to reach deeper, maybe it's finally time, just when everybody had given up, including us, on Isaiah Likely, to go back to the well here, because just when they signed Andrews to an extension, just when Likely was looking like he was going to do nothing for you all season long, he finally showed up, you know, and it wasn't a big game, granted, right? He did a little bit, 4 catches, 25 yards, but he did score. Big deal. Plenty of random tight ends score, right? But you already know where this is going. Any tight end that faces the Cincinnati Bengals is absolutely going to be fantasy gold. And so, of course, Andrews, who I can't talk about because he's already owned almost everywhere, is a good option. Isaiah Likely might even be a better option based on what we've seen. When we think it's one way, then it's the other. And so here's the rematch. It's the Bengals. We just saw them give up big game to Dawson Knox, and Dalton Kincaid scored, and Jackson Haas scored. I mean, come on, you know how this goes. These 2 teams just played in week 13, and Likely had 5 catches for 95 yards. yeah, just grab him, plug him in there. You know what? He actually might even be a good flex option, even not just a tight end, but high upside flex. That's how bad the Bengals have been. Again, they have allowed 100 more fantasy points to the tight end position than the next closest defense. And then one more option you may have forgotten about, Giants on bye. The Giants have been largely forgettable this year. Possible that Devin Singletary retains kind of the 1A role here. When we saw last before the bye, he had himself a pretty good game, over 100 scrimmage yards, partly because Tyron Tracy was hurt. Didn't seem like it's serious, and with a week off, he could be back. So it's not just about, well, he's going to own this backfield. He may not, but he still had been running ahead of Tracy. Again, this can be tricky. The Giants seem to be mixing up who they use and how they use him. But Singletary is the veteran here, and he's been more effective lately. And as I mentioned back with Dart, it's the matchup. They get that Commander defense that has just been miserable, both to rushing and passing offenses lately. And keep in mind that 100-yard game before the bye that I mentioned with Singletary, that came against the Patriots defense. And now he gets to face the Washington defense that is the third worst to running backs in terms of fantasy points and yards allowed. So definitely a good option. All right, no matter where you are in your fantasy postseason, you gotta stay active here. Keep looking on the waiver wire. Don't just sit back and relax. It's not how you win a championship, all right? Pick up the players that you need. Prevent the other teams from picking up players they might need. That's how it works here. And of course, you gotta start the right players. That's why we have, once again, start sit advice at every position and more in this week's playlist.